kind of legacy do you hope that your work leaves?
Oh, that it changes puppetry.
Mm. Welcome, friends. I'm Kristen Martin, and this is Torches. Today, we have the unconventional Hanne Tierney. Hanne is an award-winning and internationally acclaimed puppet artist and curator and founder-director of 5 Myles. I'm very excited to speak with her today. Welcome, Hanne.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm very excited to be here.
So you lived in Soho for like 50 years. You've been making work for even longer. How did you come to be in this downtown performance world?
Because basically I'm a failed writer. And I started to think, if I can't write well like George Eliot, maybe I should look at 3D writing, if it could be done. Uh-huh. So I actually took a studio and started playing around. And this is 1966. And after about 3 years, I saw my system. I saw that I could actually produce an emotionally intense gesture out of any kind of fabric or material or non-representational object over a long distance. And it didn't even show a human being to lift it up or move it. Mm. Well, you know my system, and that's and when I saw that, then I thought, that's going to be what I work on. I love this idea. And so I worked for a couple of years until I could really handle it. And then I started performing in Soho because that was the time of the old kitchen was still there, Franklin Furnace. And I sort of merged into being an artist. And so,
yeah,
we moved into Soho in 1969.
Could you explain your system? Because it's so innovative and incredible.
Well, go back to another question that you had asked is why did I call it theater without actors?
Okay, great.
Because when I thought about it, in the theater, actors basically demonstrate a text, not demonstrate, but illustrate a text. With their gestures, with their movement, with their expressions. And because of my system, I realized I can do that with anything. And the way this is done, there's a grid system with screw eyes in a ceiling. Strings go through these screw eyes and they come all the way down to the floor. Whatever I attach. Oh yeah, and then these strings are on the side of the stage, and they become an instrument. We sort of play maybe 80 strings or maybe even 100, and we play these strings almost like an instrument, and everything that we have these strings attached to on the stage floor totally goes into their gestures, their movement, into their drama, into the narrative, and it's really basically a theater without actors, except with things.
And when you started making this in 1969, I think you just said, in this way, did you position this into a theater or performance context, or were you positioning this into a visual art context?
No, that wasn't at all on my mind.
Okay.
The visual art context, except that since it's not very figurative, it becomes sculptural. It becomes sort of like a huge sculptural installation on the stage, and then things start moving and gesturing. But it never occurred to me to put it into visual theater. I thought of performing.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's non-figurative, I think it's important to say.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's non-figurative. I have done figures, but it doesn't suit me. Mm-hmm. And it's not that interesting. Of course, you can make a puppet-like figure, make a gesture saying, oh my God, my husband left me. But, but to do it with let's say, a construction rope or a 2x4, it actually becomes art then.
Yes. And did you have text in those early days when you were working, or was it solely the movement of the objects with music?
No, for me it's theater.
Yes.
It needs a text.
So you've always had text and you've always had music and you've always had these.
Always. And I've used some old symbolist plays like Oscar Wilde's Salome and The Seagull, but I've always, since I'm a failed writer, I've always written my own text.
How has that evolved as you've worked inside that same system? How has the way that you've worked with the materials or the way that you've thought about story evolved over the years?
You know, like everybody does who does something over a period of time, you simply become better. I simply could control extremely emotional gestures in, you know, like, as I said, in a 2x4. You have to keep doing things before you can understand it. But then, for me, that was sort of it. You know, if I can make a 2x4 be absolutely despairing of having no more movement but this one back and forth, and the audience is, oh my God, no, that's so sad. Then you've sort of shown the audience something, meaning that the audience knows that sense of despair, that they could read it
And the block of wood.
Yeah.
Yes. How do you balance that kind of experimentation of finding out how these materials express themselves with your craft? How do you bring those together?
I think if you experiment, or any artist who's experimenting with any ideas, visual or whichever way, we use what is expedient. And if it's a craft thing, we use it. And if you don't have it, then, you know, you fiddle with it. But yeah, I'm not really a craft person. I'm very inexact, and nothing ever fits properly.
And your work is very risky, and the work you did at 5 Myles was also very risky. So how do you encourage that kind of risk, both in your own work and in your curating?
I didn't think my work was risky. I thought it was sort of great that I saw I could do that. I was like, oh my God, it's actually fun. I don't think my audience thinks I'm doing risky work. It's just that they've never seen anything like it before.
Definitely. It's
But they
completely
sort of
unique.
get it. They get it, and they think, oh, that's so interesting, and they feel it. And no, but I think with artists, you know, especially sort of young artists, I always sort of did a little missionary work to get them go a little beyond what they were going to really show, and say, but you could, and you might. And
So you feel you were pushing them to try to push things more, to go outside the box more. How did you deal with failure when that happened?
Well, I don't think I've ever thought about this much. But
I love that.
whatever they do, especially with younger artists, you just feel you have to sort of be appreciative and let them know they're on the way and doing well. I mean, what is failure in our world anyway? It means nobody likes what you do. If you think what you did is good, there is simply no category for failure. If you feel in your guts, this is good, then there's no moment for failure.
That is a wonderful centering of confidence. Yes.
You have to. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. At 5 Myles, you worked primarily with women and people of color. Why did you make that choice there?
I saw that question, and I immediately went into our website and checked the recent, not the recent, whatever we've done previous. Right. And it's about 50-50 on the... Oh. Yeah. I don't think I was in any way wanting to show women, but that we showed so many people of color had to do with 5 Myles being in Crown Heights. And it's a traditionally black neighborhood. And so it was very natural for black artists to come and show their portfolio. You know, they weren't shy about it. We were in their territory.
Yeah.
So I got to see a lot of good work that other people probably didn't. And also Brooklyn has a lively black art world. So it was nice to be connected with that.
Yeah. And you once said that the 5 Myles was activated by the people who came through the door. So that sounds like an example of that, the artists that came through the door to share their portfolios.
Of course.
And I always felt when I visited that it was so much a part of the neighborhood and that you really welcomed people. I remember kids doing homework, you know, in the front of the gallery, and like what a feeling of welcome you created.
Well, I'll have to tell you one thing art could do in this case, because art is a public, if you have a gallery, you know, it's a public activity. So therefore there was sort of no border as to who could come in. But we gave the key to the gallery to 2 young women, girls, so they could make it into college, so they could use our internet, they could use our computers, and they came late at night because they were, you know, busy working.
Right.
Both of them, one is a teacher now, and the other one is a fabulous poet.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and you know, people didn't have internet. I mean, who could afford it? But that is what art could do, because it's a public space, and there was no shyness for people to come in. And I thought, good for art if it can do that.
What year did you put 5 Myles in Crown Heights?
2000. 1999, probably.
99. And how did gentrification change the way that it felt in the neighborhood over the years you were there?
For years and years, the audiences at the openings were completely at ease with each other, complained about the work being not good enough to each other, whatever, but really at ease. And suddenly I could tell when we had a black artist showing, it was mostly black people at the opening. When we had a white artist showing, or white artists, it was mostly white people. It was suddenly everybody became shy with each other and didn't feel that ease anymore, because it was a majority suddenly, or something was happening.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And sad.
I so completely saw that. And, you know, we did a lot of performances outdoors on the sidewalk. It was exactly the same thing. The white people would go to the other side of the street if it was a black performance, or mostly black people there. The same for black people.
Wow.
I think we're basically so uncomfortable with each other. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I think it's sad.
Yeah.
One of the great things about the subway in New York City is that you run into everyone from
I
every walk
agree.
of life, and we're
I
all on
agree.
the same terms on the subway. We all know.
And we chat if we have to. And
Yeah.
I agree with you.
You spoke about resisting the pressure of growth when you were running 5 Myles. Did that have to do with capitalist expectations?
No, I think maybe it had to do with my incompetence. Maybe that's just like, wow.
I mean, you were always very centered around welcoming experimental practices in the face of commodification, working against that.
But not so consciously, just because it's so much more interesting to see new things happen, or to see somebody really straining and struggling to go beyond what they've understood. It's just so much more interesting.
How did you balance continuing to make your own work at the same time as you were running 5 Myles and curating?
Because it was a very wonderful thing at 5 Myles. The back of the gallery was my studio. And because of that, you know, it was obviously. And after a while, and because I really did love running 5 Myles, I just gave up going to festivals, traveling, and I only performed in New York, as you know. And also, I could work as slowly as I wanted to until something was ready, and then I could perform it at 5 Myles for a month. And so I sort of had given myself really a very good way of making work that I could do.
Yeah, when you had your own space, why did you decide to come work like it here? Like we did, I think, 3 of your shows, or just 2.
No, because you have a different audience.
Right.
You know, the audience and my audience were all mostly the artists, of course, from the old Soho and so forth. But you had a real audience, you know, people who have jobs and come to see performances at here, and I absolutely like that. You know, you have to see how people can react to your work that are not inside us.
Mark Bamoudi Joseph recently said, "How do we create conditions for artists to guide us forward to the other side of fear?" Do you have thoughts or reactions to that?
Well, I sort of have an immediate reaction. What makes us think that artists aren't as fearful as we are? And what makes us think that they know what the other side of fear is? I mean, if we want to go there, we have to go back to the Renaissance and, and paint Madonnas and long-suffering Christs and who promise happiness. But I don't see how artists can do this or should do this. I think they should do their work, think about things. Art is a field, and the field periodically, needs a little kick in the teeth and change. And that's a good, art aren't missionaries.
How do you think the spirit of downtown, the experimentation and the risk, has it changed? How has it changed in the time that you've been working?
I just want to say one thing about the spirit downtown. One thing that was important in Soho was that it really created minimalism, because we could get these big lofts and suddenly space became an object. And, you'd put a 2x4 diagonally across a huge space and we'd all go, oh my God, in awe. but it changed our perception. And really, as a culture, really, we can now see things slightly differently. You can see like a white dot in a black space and feel awed. And I think that was the big thing about downtown. That was the experimentation that went on, But I think the experimentation is going on all the time in art. And look after Black Lives Matter. Suddenly the galleries were showing black artists because, oh my God, we have to do something. And look at how wildly people went into identity paintings, wild stuff, experimenting. What would I see as identity? I think that goes on all the time. We just get a little bit of stuck. What was our generation's big experimentation?
And do you think you're seeing it now, that the spirit of downtown has changed, that it's still happening, and where do you see it?
No, I think minimalism is... Young artists don't even know the names of who's Richard Serra, who's Richard Nones. I think, like in all these kind of movements, they belong to the history books, they have influenced lots of people, but they certainly disappear.
Oh, interesting. How would you identify what movement is happening right now?
A lot of searching. A tremendous amount of searching. And, I don't mean to be prejudiced one way or the other, but I do kind of keep looking what black artists are doing. There's Jessica Packer, a black woman artist, showing in a gallery in Chelsea. She has figured out a kind of a wonderful merger, like almost like a marriage of abstraction and figurative. It's beautiful work. And, I thought, oh, God, it's so exciting to think that maybe there is a common ground between the two. And she's doing it. She's, each painting you can tell she's been playing a little more with the idea and where it's going.
I have to go to that exhibition.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
I wonder about in live performance or in puppetry, what do you see? What movement or action do you see that you think is interesting right now?
I don't really know about puppetry, I have to tell you. I was hoping that a lot of puppeteers would start working because, I work life size and full stage. It really is a theatrical production. And I was hoping a lot of puppeteers would take parts of it and get a little bigger and get away from 5 puppeteers moving a teeny little stick puppet,
Yeah.
But puppetry is really just kind of, it's doing what it's always done.
Yeah.
A bit differently. Maybe the puppeteers are wearing white clothes instead of black clothes. But it's not willing to change its own systems, its its activation and manipulation systems. I don't know. I mean,
How do you define success as an artist now? And has that definition evolved for you?
no, I think for every artist, as long as show the work, it doesn't matter where you show the work, even in your bedroom, invite people, as long as your work is part of a dialogue, as long as people talk about it, as long as they want to tell other people, go see it, that's success. You can't measure it otherwise. What in? Money,
Yeah.
No, I think you can just hope that people want to see your work. They're interested to find out what you're doing. Isn't much else.
How has your practice changed as you've aged?
No, in a way, I'm concentrating now on writing. I'm thinking I'm going to see what that'll do for me. No, I've not perform anymore. It's because of this overhead grid system. It's like up and down a ladder, up and down a ladder, and I'm just done with up and down a ladder.
I understand.
And I've done enough. It's now in, everybody knows it. If somebody wants to relate to it, come to my studio. I've shown another Japanese puppeteer. I've shown my system, and she does fabulous work with it.
How do you work against our society's celebration of young artists over seasoned artists? How do you think about that?
Well, why did you say our society? You don't think that's not been the same all the time?
That's true.
Of course. The big sellers, they'll always sell because it's about investment. So leave that out. And the young artists, if there's something about the work that has made a big difference in the field, they'll always be mentioned forever. But it's a fetish. They'll disappear, and what's left is work that changed something.
Right.
I think this is not a thing that happens now. It's just always happens. The young are pushy. They still have confidence.
How do you think an artist can have a truly sustainable life? What do we need to change in our society to help that happen?
No, I don't. I feel differently about that. I feel unless you have a big ego, you're a good PR person, you don't have too complicated thoughts about your own work, you're better off taking a day job you like and making your work. What else? I mean, don't forget, nobody's asking us to be an artist. And the work we make is more or less an inside job for our tribe, for people who understand about experimentation and avant-garde. But I think we have to sort of put up with that. We're small manufacturers, and we have to try and either sell our product or keep improving it quietly by ourselves and work on an oil rig or whatever we have to do.
Why did you choose to make the work you chose to make? Where did that come from inside you? What satisfied you about making it?
In the beginning, I think I still can get totally excited by a gesture in something on the street, and suddenly it's a gesture of human intensity, emotional intensity, the way it's positioned, the way it's lying there. It just really excites me. And when I understood I could do this, actually, present that was my big moment.
And the words that would accompany that, did they express the emotion or story that, how does the thrill of that object coming to life connect to the words that you were writing?
Well, it is like an actor on the stage. It's because the gestures I'm presenting and obtaining from the objects, they do, after all, also illustrate a text, or in order to make it fully understand to the audience, the text gives the context.
And did you
The words give the context.
did you start with the materials and the objects or the words first?
No, I sometimes actually started with a play. I mean, after I understood what I could do, then plays occurred to me. And I thought, oh, that's so... There's a Maeterlinck play called, it's about death, The Intruder. And I just completely understood that I could do this, by not using human beings, that it would be very mysterious, very worrisome about death being around. And yeah, sometimes it's really a text that I find.
And what made you choose to speak that text, just you and live, as opposed to recording that text and moving the objects in response? Because it's a very different energy.
Oh, so different.
Yeah.
Because my voice activates my hands, how they move these strings. And then I have to tell you something. I was in a festival in Bitef in Belgrade, and there were a lot of Russians, and I did the seagull. And afterwards, the Russians all walked up to me and they said, we must have seen the seagull 20 times, but we've never fully listened to the text. But because I spoke all the lines, I edited a little bit. I mean, some you don't have to do. But because I spoke it, it was like they were reading it, thinking, oh, look at that. That made a big impression on me.
I love that. And were you thinking about when it was your own text? Was it the text or the objects first? I'm just curious. I know sometimes you work from plays, but when it was your own text that you created,
then it was a text.
It was the text first too. So it's always text first.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I think of your work so visual, and I think I always hear the text, and the text is taking me on a journey. But I think so much about the objects and these things coming to life in these compelling and intriguing ways and mysterious ways.
Because I never gave up longing to be a writer. And always knowing I wasn't good enough.
What kind of legacy do you hope that your work leaves?
Oh, that it changes puppetry. Oh.
For thinking about the objects.
It changes puppetry, then people will broaden it, make it really an art, make it really kind of not something you just crack up laughing because somebody can, take a hand and scratch their wooden head. I don't know. I just wish puppetry would take up and change my system, but know that it can be done differently.
I do think there are people that have been inspired by your work.
I know, and I'm saying...
Certainly like Basil Twist and a bunch of the work that he's done with fabric, I feel, is in conversation with your work.
He's the first person to say that.
Yeah, and Normandy Sherwood. I know you came to see her psychic self-defense with all the curtains and the fabric and all the characters.
I loved that. She was terrific. And then I said this Japanese artist who's doing gorgeous things with abstraction, with the stringing system. So that would be good. But, other than that, it's given me a lot of pleasure.
What are you thinking of your next chapter right now? What are you thinking is coming next?
Well, since I've just moved to the Bronx, I think it's time for me to get that place in shape. When we left the other day, I was going to say, do you want to come in and see my place? But I knew it was time for you guys to head out.
Well, I'd love to come back another time and see your place.
No, I'm sort of keeping myself open. I like writing a lot, and for no reason at all. I don't have anything in mind like, oh my God, I have to find a publisher. Not at all, but I enjoy sentences, and I enjoy changing them and looking at them again and again, and I'm sort of doing that.
The last piece that I saw of yours, which I think is the last piece that you made at Five Myles, was very political, and it was thinking a lot about violence in our culture and these younger generations and how they're coming up into that. I hadn't felt before that I was seeing work that was like political and in response to things that were happening. Could you talk about that direction change in your work?
Well, I don't know if that's a direction change, but it was a very important piece for me. Of all my pieces, I think it was the most important. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking for years what we're doing to men, that we train them to be killers, that whenever our leaders have a little conflict, send in the guys, they'll kill each other. We see who's left. Mm-hmm. Well, what else is war? Send in the guys and they will kill each other. And the men don't complain. They should unionize internationally and say, no, we're not doing that. Right. Because they're just out there killing each other. And look at the Ukraine and the Russians.
Yeah.
And we've done that to the men. You know, we really have sort of allocated them into their position. Small wonder they get a little resentful about the women being home with the babies. Say, I'll boss them around. But, you know, like, I can understand that. Mm-hmm. If men really sit back and think about the role they play in our civilization, it's pitiful. Mm-hmm. It's been a great issue with me for a long time.
Is there other work that you're making right now that is in response to things that you're seeing around you that you're having realizations about?
No. What I really, actually, I'll tell you what I would like to do is I have a very pretty extensive video of this piece, and I would like to do something with that. You know, get it out, get people to...
The piece that we were just talking about, that's from 5 Myles. Yes.
Yeah, and get people to really... And I'm working with Hanne, Hanne Vasilevsky, the video. So I'll go to Berlin, and we're going to sort of try and see what we could do with that piece.
So would you perform again then, if you were to bring that piece back?
No, Hanne thinks we should do something on the internet with it.
Oh, interesting. That's fascinating.
And, she would understand what we can do. That was incredibly important to me to do that. I don't even know how people generally understood it, but I just felt I needed to say that. Look at the men. Mm-hmm. They're just cannon fodder for the societies. Yeah.
It was a very powerful piece.
Yeah.
Men are indoctrinated, believing it's glorious.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. We pretty much said what I know. I don't know any more than this. No, I will say that having worked a lot with artists, curating and so forth, it's really been a fabulous, well, you know that, because it really sharpens your own mind considerably. You know what works, what doesn't work, what is really important, might be important, where they need little help. I've really liked that. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of maybe curating a show for a gallery in April or March, and I want to curate a show called Hope and see what I can come up with artists, what they can come up with. What is our idea of hope right now? Who's got hope, right? I mean...
We need hope desperately right now.
Yeah,
so I want to go to that show.
Thinking about curating a show called Hope.
I want to go to that show.
So I'll put my mind to it at some point.
Well, I'm deeply grateful for your work and the inspiration that you've provided me personally and so many other people for so many years, Hanne.
Well, yeah, but the one thing you understand is about making work and all those little tortures and struggles. You know perfectly well.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Hal Round for hosting us, and we hope you'll come back to more of Torches.